Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. A little bit nervous, so let's get going. Stop making your life difficult. Integrate your CI/CD pipeline with these monitoring tools. My colleague, Matik Fink, has decided to step in today. I'm Jeremy Chinquist, and Sinduri had also worked very hard on this presentation. So really quickly about yourself.
So my name is Matik Fink. I'm a web developer from Slovenia. Last years, my main focus is front-end side of things, and my poison of choice is Next and Vue.
So I'm Jeremy Chinquist. I'm actually a very active member in the Drupal Austria community. I do a lot of work as well as a project manager at Drunomics, and I really enjoy being at events like this and DrupalCons and everything. Sinduri as well, sitting in the audience. So about us, yes, we do a lot of projects in Nuxt. We have Drupal backend. Most of our projects are decoupled projects. We have an open source Lupus decoupled, as well as our cloud product, which is a decoupled front-end content pool. And we tend to rely heavily on the layout builder in core, so we're constantly improving that as well. Why we care really a lot about this topic is the more automated tools that you can use effectively, actually it reduces the amount of technical debt that you have. It allows you to update faster. The regressions can be found faster and fixed quicker, giving us the ability to basically just live our lives, have fun coding, play more foosball. All right, so the talk today will be about the CI/CD pipeline tool that we use, and then we'll go through the different stages of automated testing that we've implemented at Drunomics. So we rely heavily at the moment on Jenkins. That's the one that we use mostly for in-house projects, a lot of client projects as well, and for this cloud project that we have, we are actually doing more with GitHub Actions. So a lot of our clients are also experiencing that. The graphic here you can see is basically all of the steps that we're doing in Jenkins. So we go from building the branch or the specific main branch like develop or test or even the prod, and it goes through all of the steps, and then we have a few things that happen in parallel. Jenkins is really nice to us in that it can actually do things very flexibly as well as process these going together. And you can see that the different steps there, so the different technologies that we implement until we get to an end build in our CI/CD pipeline. What's currently in use? We've actually looked at Circle CI in the past, and we evaluated it and said basically it doesn't make sense for us at the time. It was a little more expensive. The setup itself was a little bit more difficult for us, where Jenkins, we saw we had a lot of flexibility. It was the most flexible solution for us and became our tool of choice. GitHub Actions is, in our case, also relatively inexpensive simply because we are using GitHub already, so the actions themselves don't take as much to add on top, so to speak. For the most part, in all three of these technologies, what you're doing is if you have any sort of problems with the deployment or whatever, you have very detailed console outputs that you're able to see where something went wrong, if a test failed, what step failed, etc. So these items, these tools are incredibly helpful when you're debugging or looking at a regression and whatnot. Honestly, this row is Drunomics, which I'm very impressed with. So if any of you have any questions about the code, I would suggest to talk to a few of these people. They are in it day in and day out, so they can show you a couple of things like a Jenkins file or whatnot. Good. Let's move into the automated testing tools. Obviously, there's a couple of tools that are just good to use. We've invested the time to build them into our pipeline. So we're running it through PHP stan If anybody has a question as to what that is, definitely ask us. And PHP CS. So one of the lines on the command, on the build command, is basically just to run it through the PHP CS. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, so PHP CS is just a command line command, and you get your code checked then for specific formatting rules, which then can help you quickly identify if you need to fix that. You can run it locally, or you can have it be done in the CI/CD pipeline. So yeah, fairly common things, but it just allows for well-structured code. One of the things that we don't use as much is the Drupal's PHP unit testing itself. We rely on it. So if we have a module, we tend to write a few tests and whatnot. But typically speaking, we are using Drupal's PHP unit testing when we do a deployment to like test system, just to run it through once to make sure that nothing's been broken. But we don't constantly test it in every branch, because we also have to think about speed of delivery and other things like that. So there's little nuances, but we do use it. We just don't rely as heavily on it.
Yeah, so next we have component testing. Yeah, we were using Storybook on Nux2 project. It's a good way to have a list of components and visualize different component states and also edge case states. When upgrading to Nux3, we switched to Histoire since we had issues with Storybook. Nux3 support was not stable. Yeah, and Lost Pixel can be used for visual regression tests alongside Histoire. So, and all these tools can be run locally on CI environments, and that's it.
If you have any questions, we can also answer them in between on these slides. So raise your hand if you've got a question. Yeah, a couple of points that we highlighted why we used Histoire over Storybook. End-to-end testing. In the past, we used Behat testing a lot. It actually worked really well for us for a time. And one of Behat's main good points is that you can really do human readable tests. So you can say things like, if I click here, I get to do this, or I see this. You were able to add new commands fairly easily. But we found after a while that Mink was becoming more problematic. We weren't able to run in non-headless environments as well. We were constantly refactoring tests that were becoming unstable, and it became more and more of a pain in the butt to do. So we evaluated that last year. Cypress was definitely in the running. But in the end, what we did is we went with Playwright, because we were able to do multi-language support. We were able to look at all browsers. And there was just a lot of tools that Playwright brought. And actually, Playwright also was faster. So when we look at it, it's open source, well-maintained. There's little gems in there like auto wait and auto retry. So one of the stupid things with a couple other technologies, you had to say, and I wait for 30 seconds in order for something to appear. This will automatically just wait for it, and it becomes much easier to just use. So it's a very powerful tool set. And as you can see, we're actually using Playwright. You'll see that on the next slide. We're using it for our VRT testing as well.
Yeah, so visual regression testing, VRT for short. So Diffie is assessed for VRTs. You can specify what pages to run the test against. It has a nice interface for managing baseline images and has integrations for reporting, like sending reports to Slack channel and so on. On some older projects, we use Backstop.js. And with Playwright, you can self-host the baseline images. So you can also use it for VRTs. You can basically have the baseline images as part of a Git repository and perform the VRT inside the Playwright test file, so in code. So if you are already using Playwright, it's a good choice for sure. Yeah, the only downside is that you have to maintain the baseline images yourself, because there's no UI for that. So that's one downside.
Do you want me to say it?
Sure.
I can say that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So once again, yeah, we did choose to go with Diffie for some of the projects, especially it became cost effective. We were able to manage those base images fairly simply. It's a cloud service, so you have to have running costs on it, but we found that it was very user-friendly. It was very good to use for us, and it didn't cost too much, so we were very happy with it. Yeah, Playwright, if we're using that heavily for the testing itself, for the end-to-end testing, we've been also using it then for the VRT testing. Backstop.js actually has many issues and is not as well maintained, so we have been moving away from it over the last couple of years. On to Lighthouse for performance and site speed I/O. We've basically used these two exclusively. So obviously, Lighthouse being a Google product, we're just calling its, I want to say API. I don't know if that's the right word, actually, but we're calling it service. We're running it on a CI server, and we get a lot of output, basically, on where we need to improve speed. We can take a look if things are lazy loaded or if things are cached properly, things like that. Site speed I/O is just another tool as well. We use both of them to varying degrees.
One question on performance, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
What kind of tests do you run exactly? Do you like...
One second. You have to...
Thanks. What kind of tests exactly do you run on performance? Do you like compare against a base? If the current build, like some branch that you're working on, is exceeding some margins on the base, or you're just checking different pages to see what are the results in, I don't know, running report or something?
Yeah, so we have a threshold set in our CI pipeline. So if it's below that threshold, the build errors out. And also, you can also, of course, check the build logs of the pipeline and see what's going on there and the score. And also the logs, like the different messages, like, I don't know, some issue is there present for instance, best practices or performance or accessibility. So we have separate thresholds for all those categories.
So you basically have like homepage needs to load under 500 milliseconds, and if it's...
No.
I'll repeat that question. You're asking if we have something set to, if the home page has to load in under 500 milliseconds, if that's correct.
If you have like, those are this is the base, and if the current build is,
It's
in this case, above,
it's based on score, so 0 to 100, and we have so threshold. If the threshold of the build is like score is lower than the threshold, it errors out. So it's like
the whole score, not individual.
So we have individual pages, and if any is lower.
No.
It's
Yeah.
actually taking both the both the individual pages and also a set of the website, or the demo content.
Yeah. But that's okay.
Yeah, but thank you for the questions. Okay, I think this one's mine, right? Yeah, yeah. Security auditing and monitoring tools. So we use several different tools consistently for simply staying up to date. Are we conform to our security guidelines, where the modules in our project are updated within a certain length of time, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to consistently watch this, and we have different tools set up to consistently watch. Renovate is something that will run on and evaluate our GitHub repository itself, and will report to us if there's any sort of security updates on things or some violations. Honestly, I don't know how you set that up. There's a few people here who do. But another thing that we consistently use is the npm audit function. So that's one of the lines in our build scripts, and it will just simply tell us whether or not there's a violation for npm. The Drupal updates pages I put in here, but obviously you have to combine it with a second tool in order to be able to monitor it. So on cron run, of course, the updates module, it will evaluate whether or not something is needed to be updated, and then we have I'm going to start with the right one here, actually. We have oh dear, which Leo in the audience is actually doing the oh dear integration module. He's maintaining that. And so the oh dear is a service. It's a website. You can go to it. When you set it up with your project, it calls the Drupal installation. The Drupal installation then with this module will tell oh dear if there's an issue or so with one of the Drupal module updates, or maybe there's some, it will reply back that there are some log entries which are error messages or something. So it will report to this monitoring service oh dear. Oh dear as well has a threshold that we set, and if it violates that threshold, then it will alert us basically. And it's to the extent that if it's on production, sometimes it will alert us 5 times a day to say, hey, get this updated, get this taken care of. So we really react on a lot of our higher end projects very quickly due to that. The other things in there, local PHP security checker, we use that as well. We tend to get those by email, of course. I think you know of a few of those services like CERT within Austria. It's just an organization partially working with the government. They will send out information if something needs to be updated. So we make sure that we're on those advisory lists. Composer audit, another thing that you will actually call from the command line. We use it at GitHub. Sorry, not at GitHub. We do it on per branch or per main branch. And then the GitHub feature security we just have turned on basically, so it'll let us know as well. The only one that really requires actually a lot of work is the oh dear integration, because that tends to change on occasion. So Leo definitely has been maintaining that and keeping it up to date.
Yeah, and then we have accessibility testing. We use X with Playwright. So inside Playwright tests, we also execute X. You can specify which standard you want to be compliant with, and it then generates a report if there's any issues, accessibility issues.
So coming to the end of our presentation, this is just an overview again of what we said we use at the moment and we recommend. Please do read through it and look at the different websites that we've linked to. Of course, this is a project within the company, so I'm very thankful for everybody who also looked at the slides, told me where I went wrong. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Maybe we can just...
You get to answer.
I guess.
Is there a, say, integration with the Drupal API? You know, say Behat has the Drupal extensions where it provides methods towards the Drupal API. Does Playwright have the same thing?
Maybe he can answer.
Roderick, go for it.
There is a GitHub repository which is growing. We've started to maintain it. It's on github.com/Drunomics. You will see in /Playwright Drupal utils. And we've, well, not recently, but fairly recently started to use it, so it's still, you know, growing.
Yeah, so what he said about the Drupal integration is an interesting topic because that goes, when we're talking about functional testing, that also affects a lot the time that they run, the tests, the functional tests in this case. So yeah, having some sort of Drupal integration like Behat has, where instead of each time you create whatever you need, like term, node, user, whatever, through the interface, because you don't have a direct way to API the Drupal, and instead you create them programmatically for this particular test, because you don't need to test each time that you can create a that speeds up the tests. I, however, find Behat unfortunately less and less maintained as a system, as an ecosystem. So honestly, I'm in search of a new functional testing that supports Drupal API integration. Otherwise, it's a bit pointless to me because, like, you switch to Cypress, for example, and you lose that. So yeah, Playwright seems like, you know, I saw that Playwright integrates a lot of different types of testing, but if it doesn't have the Drupal API integration, that would not make sense in my mind, at least, or at least not much. So yeah, that's what I had to.
Can I field one part of that too? One of the things that we have in that build pipeline is an init database dump. So on each of the runs, it'll just import the pre-set up database that we have with the content and the images as well. And so we're basically starting from a set level, and then we're not using the API nearly as much or as dependent on it, because we can then just run things like node create normally.
You need to maintain that.
We have a script that will automatically update it as we are, we update it at intervals, so to speak. So after a more major Drupal core update or so and a lot of database update commands have been run, then we'll run our script to also dump that updated database file into a zip and commit it to the project. And so it can be used on the next run as the basis.
If I can chime in, just maybe it didn't come through what Roderick was saying, so we maintain a tool. We can basically run drush commands during the playwright tests with this tool, so we did this type of integration. So you could just, it's open source, you can try it out with playwright.
I think both things are very valid. This approach probably would not work as well if we did not have a database with a demo content. You are right in that. But so both things are a combination.
It sounds like we got to make a bot.
Have you considered, instead of using database, using something like drush site install with existing configuration and then some default content?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
So an easy way to provide test content is to an actual migration. So you create a new module with a test data migration, and it's very easy to create content like that in YAML files, and then you just run the migration when you need it.
Yeah, and in another project, we do just like what you said. We do a site install. But on top of that, we do that with this dump. So it uses a site install based on existing config, and it has data from a dump.
So in the dump you have only the content.
Yeah, so basically it's best of the two worlds. So we can do, if we want, we can do a site install with existing content. We can also use the dump for a full install without the site install. So we can combine whatever we need per case. Yeah, we need to maintain the dump, but again, there's a script.
Which one have you found to be less problematic? Like it shows, say, some difference between actual production database in terms of how it behaves and what you're using one of these approaches. Like for example, your tests are green, but actually there is something because the dump plus the site install has some slight difference. See what I mean?
So you mean, yeah, but we have different stages, so there's nothing preventing you from keeping not the production, but some stage synchronized to your production data, anonymized, whatever, and you run your tests against that stage. Then it's running on a production status.
But that would mean that you use your staging environment, which some people use for QA and UAT, for example, or only for UAT, to run automated tests.
Sure.
I don't think there will be a perfect answer for all cases, so you have multiple choices and compromises. Yeah.
Like what works best? What works best in your mind?
Please on the mic.
Thanks. No, I was just trying to get your input on what works best, because on theory you might, like, it sounds reasonable that drush site install existing config and some default content should mimic exactly the production database, because that's the end goal, right? You want to see if something breaks the production, right? So this sounds on theory that it should be exactly the same as production, except the content, which you can use, demo content or default content. But have you found any, like, you assume that you do it, you say you do that. Have you found any issues with that where this doesn't mimic exactly?
Of course.
And
well, you're never going to get perfect. I mean, unless you're replicating the entire production database to all of your branches.
Yeah, but then you have the issue where
then you're actually in violation of GDPR.
Yes, but then also you have the issue where you need to, well, some people do it, but like you need to dump the production database like every night at 2, then sanitize it, then import it somewhere, then run your tests, say they are nightly tests, for example, I don't know. Or,
all right.
And that's additional cost and additional processes and so on, right? So,
but there's no, I mean, if you want that level of certainty and that level of quality assurance, it costs.
Yeah. So I guess the last thing I was saying was more like, if you found that this replacement of using sanitized production database dump, where you use the dump directly or you use site install plus some dump, if that's very, very close to, like, this doesn't produce almost no side effects, to
You're
me
never
that...
going to get perfect.
No, I'm not saying that should be perfect. Say if it's like failing all the time, well, that's maybe an exaggeration, or it's like failing rarely.
As soon as you discover failures, something in this pipeline is going to turn red.
Yeah.
And we have certain processes in place to say, okay, there's something major in this pipeline that's failing. 1 or 2 developers get on it immediately and fix it.
Yeah, okay. But, I mean, I guess it's maybe what I was trying to get to is not quite clear in my mind either. So
that's okay. One of the things that I'd like to bring across with this, and I think it's important for a lot of people at Drupal, is this level actually requires a lot of energy to keep and maintain. But one of the major things that we win on is when there's a regression, we know where it is, we see it, we can also resolve it quickly. And when we're doing things like a module update or a security patch, we're implementing it in our system, we can quickly run it through all of these different stages and see where's the problem. Is it actually acceptable, this problem? Can we ignore it for 2 hours? Things like that.
Yeah.
I think we're running circles around not a standard answer, and the fact is that even in some cases the database, the production database may work, but the site install may not work, depending on the process of how we developed things. So there is no standard answer. There is definitely effort that must be done. So either you add it to the testing to make sure that you don't have extra effort in other places, either you spend it on other sections. But in any case, you definitely have effort to spend.
Yeah, no,
this is this is a standard answer.
That's obvious.
Can I still say something?
I'll say first something. Yeah, but having like a CI/CD pipeline for every PR, and running through everything, it really minimizes, of course, the chance of like on later changes, on later stages to be some problem. You know,
No, I don't think we're discussing if we should do CI/CD, right? I mean,
No.
That's,
Unfortunately, his comment
how?
is being lost again.
Here I would still I would still like to make the case for the migration, because I think this is what this is has the least dependency on anything else, on the basically on the structure or the environment. And so, for instance, we also did demo content where you have to manually basically provide the connections, the references, and the IDs, and update these. So this is quite complicated to maintain. But with migration, you can have data source which is directly in the code itself as row embed, I believe it's called. Or you can provide it in CSV files directly in the module. So basically, there's no dependency on the environment, any init database, or in what state Drupal is in, or in which configuration. You can just enable the migration module, run the migration, and it will create all the references, the data, and so on, the nodes, taxonomy, and whatsoever. And I've found it personally very easy to maintain, and even easier than writing behead tests where you create the content, because it's really just the data directly in the YAML files itself. And you have references like just by the node title, so you don't have to references as well ID as references. You can just say, I create an article with some specific title, and you can reference the article then in other entities with the title you just provided in the migration itself. So I would actually recommend looking into that because it's the least complex of them all.
Any last questions? Thank you. I would say this was a real Q&A.